video, I'm going to talk a little bit about dual coding and about learning styles. And these are two really important topics that I'm sure you've heard about before. And they're actually really similar, which is important to understand. I think a lot of myths that we have in education actually come from a grain of truth, or at least start out from a place of truth, but maybe get oversimplified or shifted in some way to become something that's just not true. And that's sort of the case with dual coding and learning styles. They're similar, but dual coding is evidence-based. We have scientific evidence to support the use of dual coding in the classroom, or just using dual coding when trying to learn anything anywhere, while learning styles doesn't have support. So let me talk a little bit about what each of these are, and then I can sort of disentangle them. So dual coding is this idea that when we try to learn something, we're better able to learn it and understand it if we have both visual and verbal representations of the thing. Really, it boils down to multimodal learning, so multiple representations. Visuals like pictures or diagrams, cartoon strips, graphic organizers, these are inherently more concrete than verbal information, but we still need the verbal information to fully describe and explain concepts. And so dual coding just says that when we have those two types of representations together and we're able to integrate them, we learn and understand something better. Now, learning styles, on the other hand, is more about differences among individuals. And it's true, there are differences among individuals. It just turns out that learning styles isn't one of those important differences when it comes to learning. But the idea behind learning styles is that individuals have preferences. So I might prefer to listen or to read. Someone else might prefer to learn by doing or to learn via pictures. The idea is that we all have preferences, and according to learning styles, that particular preference or style must be catered to in order to maximize learning. So for learning styles, an instructor would actually have to go through and individually diagnose all of the students to figure out what their particular style is, and then cater instruction to that particular style. Now, there is no evidence to suggest that this is effective, and actually it can be quite harmful. And I'll explain why in just a minute. But you can see how these two might be confused or might go together. With dual coding, we're talking about combining representations and saying everybody learns better when we have multiple representations and can integrate those representations. Whereas with learning styles, we're saying if we pick a certain person, or if we have an individual who likes a certain way of learning, we should give them information in that way to maximize learning, and that's just not the case. Now, of course, in the classroom, I know that the true learning styles hypothesis isn't really playing out. Teachers are not actually going and individually diagnosing students and then catering to that exact diagnosis individually for that student. They might know what students prefer. This student is visual, this student is verbal. They might have even paid for a learning styles inventory or found a free one to figure out what the students are. But that doesn't mean that then every student gets their own individual lesson. And that's a good thing. We don't want the students to get their own individual lesson catered only to their preference, because we know that that doesn't help learning. What's better is to combine all of these different representations. So what tends to happen is, right, you figure out what types of students you have in the classroom, you figure out their style, and then you instruct to multiple styles all at once. And that's really just dual coding or multimodal learning. You're providing a lot of different representations. So a lot of people will say, well, then what's really the problem with learning styles if what's actually happening ends up looking more like dual coding, which is evidence-based, than this learning styles thing, which we don't have a lot of evidence to support? Well, the problem is that those students still think that they have an individual style and that they learn best in that way. And this, in theory, can produce a fixed mindset and can actually shut students off to certain topics. So imagine a student who is an auditory learner. They might say, well, I just can't do literature. I just can't do it. I'm not very good at reading. Or a student who thinks that they can't do math because they need visuals and they feel like math doesn't have enough visuals. This can be really problematic. It's a fixed mindset, and we'd rather the students feel like they can attack a bunch of different types of topics, and that each topic might have its own style or way of being taught. So certainly we wouldn't want to take a bunch of visual learners and only show them diagrams of the human body and never actually let them try performing surgery if they're going to be surgeons, right? We need to combine all of these different types of learning. So it's better if the students just understand lots of different representations are helpful. Certain topics may lend themselves better to certain types of representations. So of course, surgeons are eventually going to have to learn by doing. Literature involves reading. We can try to infuse visual representations into as much as possible, but at the end of the day, each student doesn't have their own style and way that they can learn, and they can't learn anything else unless it's in that style. Rather, humans as individuals are better able to grasp information when we come at it from a lot of different angles and try multimodal learning or using dual coding. And I just recently wrote a blog. This is June of 2019. The blog is coming out tomorrow, highlighting some of these issues, talking about dual coding, talking about learning styles, and talking about implementing dual coding in high school classrooms, a biology classroom and an English classroom. So you can head over to our website, www.learningscientists.org, and check out the blog. And we'll see you next time.